Hey guys, currently recording this on 4th of July, so if you hear any fireworks in the background, sorry. I will try to edit it out as much as I can, but it's gonna be impossible to get them all out. I'm still yet to play Resident Evil Requiem, and I've actually kept myself from hearing any spoilers about it, so I am excited, but I can't really justify spending $70 on a game that would take me 10 hours to complete. So I'm still waiting for it to go on a bigger sale. And it's going to be a little bit because I am working on a Silent Hill 2 video while I play that before I'll get to that. But just know that it will eventually come around. But before that, I wanted to rant about my opinions on the previous Resident Evil games. Starting with the first one that I played, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. I think this is a really good introduction to Resident Evil for anybody who's never played it before. I've actually gifted it to multiple of my friends because it regularly goes on sale for $5, and that's an absolute steal for this game. I also think out of all the games, this probably has the best premise laid out on a paper. You go into Louisiana to try to find your missing wife, and you end up accidentally joining this crazy family where everybody has their own quirks and traits and like things that make them crazy. This one hooked me pretty hard. I think that the puzzles are also pretty straightforward, and the house layout is a straight path, so it's very easy to not get lost. And I think that that might be the one thing that would turn a non Resident Evil survival horror person off, is how vast some of these games environments get and how easily you can get lost. But I think in this one it is back to the roots of more of a horror approach, and I think that the family is all very very interesting. The dad has the most presence in the game, as he's kind of like a Mr. X character that follows you around the house, and I think that the mystery in that game being unwind very slowly is good. I like how it all ties into the eighth one too. I think the enemies in that game are probably the worst. They're really just blob zombies who can come off as bullet sponges if you have it on the higher difficulties. Not too much horror from that. And of course, it has basement scenes or sewer scenes like any Resident Evil game. I also think that it kind of lacks the charm that I get from Resident Evil. I'll talk about it a little bit more once I get into 2 and 3. But I think that Resident Evil is supposed to be over the top and super campy while still having a horror approach to it. Like you're supposed to see Leon do a backflip off the wall with an RPG and then shoot it into the main villain to defeat it. Like that's kind of what separates it from being just another survival horror game, is how campy and corny our characters are in this super serious story. Whereas this one takes itself a lot more serious. I still think it has elements of that, like Ethan cutting his arm off originally and then being able to heal it right back on or Mia cutting off his arm and him being able to heal it back on is leaning into that quite a bit. I like that each family member has like a distinct part of the house where the vibe's completely different. This one probably saved the series, even though I haven't played 5 and 6. I don't hear the most positive reviews about 5 and 6. And so I think that if this one didn't do as well as it did and didn't take it back to the more horror roots instead of being so campy, like 5 with Chris punching the boulder in hell, then it would have probably burnt out a lot of people with the franchise. So it was good that they rebooted it here. I think once we switch perspectives with Chris and start playing as him on the cruise ship, battleship, whatever it is, that's when the game starts to go downhill. It definitely turns it more into an action game than a horror approach, and you're kind of just mowing through a bunch of zombies to figure out what happened to Mia. Resident Evil 8, though, I'm a big fan of. I think the hype for that game before launch was huge, probably the biggest besides Requiem, and it was cool to see the community so excited and new players so excited. I think the atmosphere in that one is really, really good. I like the castle. I like the approach of landing in the woods when you first wake up after being kidnapped by Chris and finding the castle. I think the castle looks sick, and then slowly getting your way into it. The castle portion's a lot of fun. I do think the village aspect of it is a little bit slow, and it takes its time introducing you to these people who are eventually just going to die and turn into monsters. but it does give you a little bit of sense of what's going on. That game's definitely a lot more of an action game, though. There's not much horror to it. They're overdoing the idea of having a Mr. X character with the main like 8-foot chick following you around the castle. I don't think every Resident Evil game needs to have somebody following you around. But I also think that this is probably the best boss fights in the whole series, with the chicks that turn into bugs. I think that the main chick turning into a dragon was a lot of fun, and probably the biggest spectacle Resident Evil fight that there's been. I like the ending quite a bit. I like how Ethan sacrifices himself, and it's a lot more of a close-ended title where there most likely won't be a spin-off. And with 9 going into the direction that it did, I don't think that there will be Ethan again. So I did like that it was more of a self-contained story. Just it and 7. RE2 is probably my favorite game of all time. Not even probably, it is. I replay that game at least once a year. I love it. The only complaint I could really think of is I think that Claire's section's a little bit weak. There's not much motivation in it besides her just trying to save the kid, and the kid's probably the least interesting thing about the game. So I don't recommend starting from her perspective and then going into Leon's. I also think that it makes the game shorter. Leon's section into hers is a lot better. I loved Leon's section in that game. I like Mr. X a lot. He actually feels intimidating, and he'll randomly pop out, like the helicopter being in the middle of the hallway. The police station feels very fleshed out, and you slowly unlock it as you're exploring and you figure out more puzzles. And it really only takes place in the underground sections, but I feel like they feel very connected. It's probably the most tonally consistent out of any of the games. All the side characters are great. Like I like Ava a lot. I like the cop in the beginning that turns into a zombie. Claire's good too. And Leon like steals the show. This game really sold a lot of people on Leon being like the main like franchise character throughout all of Resident Evil. The Mr. X boss fight is super fun, and making you use the environment instead of guns to defeat him is a really good idea. The ending boss is also cool. As the doctor continues to mutate, it never feels repetitive. He continues to raise the bar of starting out in the lab and then exploding into the whole train. It's probably my favorite boss fight out of the whole series besides Resident Evil 8 Dragon. Resident Evil 3 is a stinker. I think everybody knows this, and I'm probably not going to talk about this one much because I don't even really remember it. I think as the first introduction to Jill, since I didn't play RE1, she comes off as super lame, and I think Carlos comes off as even more lame because he never shows up again after this. The one positive thing I can give it is exploring Raccoon City as the outbreak happens is pretty cool, but the game is so short, like 7 hours, and I know Resident Evil games are supposed to be short, but it's so short that it never really gets time to stick with you. And it feels so rushed. It feels more like DLC than an actual game. Couldn't even recall any of the boss fights from that game. It also has another Mr. X character that follows you around, but this time you're able to evade and roll from him, which completely takes away the threat of running into him. It also starts to lean a lot more into the action approach than horror, with Resident Evil 2 being a really good mix of both. It was also a little bit disappointing for me. This might be my hottest take yet, but I am not the biggest fan of RE4. Not because it's not a good game. I just heard so many people hype it up for so long, especially when it was coming out, that I kind of expected it to be this absolutely end-all tall games and be my favorite thing ever. And I was left a little bit disappointed with it. That after playing Village, the cult Catholic people start to feel a little bit repetitive. Even though Village is a lot more monsters and these are humans, it didn't hit as hard. Leon is he's supposed to be a super serious character, but he comes off as a little bit too stoic in this game. Boss fights are really easy in the game. I know that they were designed around a lot like a PS2 console, so they couldn't really be the most challenging thing, but I don't really have any of the boss fights stick with me. I thought that the main villain in the game was really charming, though. He's probably the best villain in the whole series. He's really funny, the little puppet dude. And I do understand how revolutionary the game was, but it never really stuck with me like I wanted to. And I do plan on replaying it and seeing if my opinions changed at all. I like the chainsaw people. I think that they're a funny threat to see somebody running at you with a chainsaw, and something you'd really only see in Resident Evil. Having Ashley as the companion though is different. Obviously in 2 you had the little girl that followed you around a little bit, but actually having a companion that you have to protect and follows you around and helps you with puzzles is a different approach, and it does help. Instead of the evading like from 3, I think that the parrying is really well done here, and it actually makes combat super satisfying when you're able to parry an attack before it happens, and it's limited. The boat section is probably one of my least favorite sections in the whole franchise. I was not very big on that part. Krauser's pretty cool. He's a nice secondary antagonist for Leon to actually face off against somebody who's in the same skill and outlandish moves as him. And so that is the best fight in the game. I totally called Ava in my RE2 section, so let me correct that really quick. But she's really boring in this game. I think in 2 she had a lot of charm, and there was like a sass about her, but I think that that's pretty stripped away, and I honestly don't remember like any scenes of her in the 4th one. All right, now let's rank them. This has all of the games, so obviously I'm not going to touch on those, just the remakes. Resident Evil 2 gets an S tier. 3 gets a D. 4 gets an A. I would say an A minus. Let's see, Biohazard, I would put B. And then Village, I would put C. But yeah, that would be my tier list.